Hey guys, this is Hot Topic review number 7. We're going to talk about quadratics and some of the processes and steps that go into. So we're going to focus on, we'll look at a quadratic formula example, we'll talk about completing the square, and we'll talk about shortcut methods that deal with finding zeros and solutions that you'll come across on multiple choice questions on the Regents. So we're going to start with it's labeled question 6, it's really question 1. But again, I was just kind of copy and pasting these together. So question 6 is solving the equation. They want us to complete the square. Which equation is a step? So to complete a square, your goal is to complete the square by getting a value that would be the number that you're using multiplied by itself. So to do that, first thing we need to do is move the constant over. Now I need to fill in this value here. And to find that value, I take the linear value, which is -8, and I divide it by 2 and square it. The reason I'm doing this is because that's the relationship between the linear term in the middle and the number at the end. So I divide that number by 2 because -8 represents the number I am adding to itself, and the number I get multiplied by itself will be that last number. So if I do this in the calculator, I'm going to use the parentheses around that fraction, and I'm going to end up with, in this case, positive 16. Now if you got your calculator handy, I'll show you how I would type it in. After I turn it on, I have parenthesis -8 divided by 2 parenthesis squared. So it looked like that in the calculator. Okay. Now the other thing you got to make sure you do is you got to add 16 to the right side as well, because you are working with an equation. And so now that would mean that, well, I look at my answers right now, I end up getting 23 on the right side, which means I can get rid of the ones that say 9. And then I have to determine what will complete that square. So the number that will complete this will be -4, because -4 and -4 added together give you -8, and -4 times -4 give you 16. So that means that this answer is going to be choice 2. So that would be how you would do some of the questions involved with completing the square. Now moving on from there, we're going to look at a question that you can solve a couple ways. We're going to look at question 12 here. They want us to figure out the solutions to this equation. So first thing I'm going to do, because I want to see the middle factors, I want to subtract the 24 on each side. Now I am not subtracting it from the 8x. You'll notice that when I write it right now, I'm going to keep it separate. I do have it set equal to 0, so I can find those solutions, those, in this case, those zeros. Now, one way you could do this question is you could, if you wanted to, take each answer, and notice that each one, like question 1, this is actually 2 answers. There's 4 plus 2 radical 10 and 4 minus 2 radical 10. So before I do the quadratic formula method, I could right now, because it's multiple choice, I could throw in one of those answers. So let's say I try to do 4 plus 2 radical 10. So I'm typing that into the calculator right now. I have to adjust that, get out of that square root sign, and that's squared. And then it says -8. And then same thing, I got to put that same number in. So I have replaced each x with that first answer, the 4 plus 2 radical 10. And if it's the answer, it should equal 24. So in this case, I know right now that that answer gave me 24 out. So it should be safe and have choice 1 as my answer. So that's what we're looking at for an answer right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to figure out if that's the answer using the quadratic formula. So Quadratic formula is on your reference sheet. So it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you need to know a couple things. First off, what are a, b, and c? And you get that from the equation. So a is 1, b is negative 8, and c is negative 24. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those numbers and put them in that quadratic formula. So I would end up with positive 8 in the first spot, because I have a negative and then a negative value, plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. I'm going to run out of space here. And I'm going to divide all that by 2a. So in this case, 2 times 1. I want to simplify any part that is not yet, so I'm going to put the square root in the calculator with the numbers underneath it. So I have negative 8 squared minus 4 parentheses 1 parentheses negative 24. So I got 160. So now I have 8 plus or minus the square root of 160 all over 2. And at this point I want to see if I can simplify that square root. So when you do that, you want to think of perfect square values. Now one that stands out for me right now is for 160, I'm going to use 16 and 10. Because I know the perfect square, well, 16 is a perfect square of the number 4. So I reduce that radical. Now what I have to do is divide the whole numbers, 8 and 4, by 2. So if I divide 8 by 2, I get 4, and 4 divided by 2, I get 2. So that's the reason why that answer, again, is choice 1. So those are the different methods you can use for solving for quadratics. There's completing the square and quadratic formula. Sometimes you might see one of those or both on the Regents. And if it's multiple choice, you can use a guess and check method like I did for this question. Even though if it's a radical, same thing, you would substitute in for parentheses to help you solve each question.